Everyone, welcome back. Cheers and welcome back to the channel. I literally spent like the past 30 minutes doing a recording only to find out the Rodecaster with the Mac, and sometimes this happens, for some reason the cable, it gets static in the line, and found out a way to bypass it using a secondary channel, using a USB-C to USB-A cable with an adapter to USB-C, I guess like down regulates it to USB 1.0, USB 2.0 interface, which is supposed to help with the mixing so that static doesn't happen. We'll actually see if that's the case here. I'm going to give it another shot without stopping to check this. But so anyways, I had to use Mac Whisper to actually kind of look at the stuff I talked about because it really kind of came out beautifully. I'm sorry that you're hearing this now secondhand rather than the way it was originally intended, but the static, like I said, can't hear it. So fortunately, Mac Whisper was able to pick it up. So, hey, cheers. Welcome back to the channel. It's been probably a couple of weeks since I've posted something, but as I mentioned a couple of videos back, I really feel like I've been going through a spiritual transformation in my life, and I'm trying to make sense of this very trying time in my life. I think as humans, we tend to identify with ideas, purposes that ultimately become our identity, right? And so, it can relate to a hobby, it can relate to a job, but it becomes part of our identity, almost part of our ego that we build up, this shared identity and purpose through the kind of actions and what we do, and especially as Americans in the individualistic society that we live in, right? And, you can shape and build an entire life, out of identifying with one specific thing, whether that be science, music, etc., right? But imagine for a moment if you spent the better part of the past 20 years building such a life, to have all that stripped away from you in a really unfair, disproportional way. That's what happened to me. That's what I've experienced, and I've asked myself, why has this happened? Especially since the way I choose to show up in my life for others, and the caring, kind person that I am, non-judgmental, to a degree, probably almost to a fault, self-sacrificing in a way that we are the company we keep, right? I just genuinely had this belief that people operate from good if good energy, enters their orbit, not the opposite, where it can be used in a way that's, a person's authenticity, a person's real genuineness could be weaponized because, if you have dark forces around you, it's like a mirror. It holds up a mirror to the darkness, and the darkness does not like what it sees. It confuses that darkness or that trigger, of the light shining on the darkness in such a way that stirs up inner demons in people, right? And unfortunately, while they're being invited to be more authentic, less fake, more real, and, likewise, encourages the person that's born of the light, that's maybe even forged in the darkness, in the fire, in the isolation, etc., to also recognize better the way that things work. Because I think people of light, myself included, typically have this view that, we have this ideology that, if you put good in, you get good out invariably. And that should be the case in a perfect world. However, we live in a very broken and falling world. So while this happened to me, it first felt like a punishment, like I'm losing everything for absolutely no real good, legitimate reason. But I also need to recognize that maybe the way I've approached, hard work and sacrifice for the past, 20 years has also been, maybe in its own way, to myself at least, toxic in the sense of how self-sacrificing I've been, to the point that I think it has affected, my health, my physical health. And that really God's redirected me down a different path, and he's challenging me right now to, trust my gut, to bring forward, to share the gifts, the background, the experience that I've lived throughout my life of God showing up always in the nick of time. That said, not so much in this specific season of my life, but I think God's challenging me to place more trust on Him and to not rely on using my own energy stores, my own understanding, to try to understand what's happened, but to understand that I'm going to be cared for. Everything's going to work out. I think right now for a lot of us, just looking at the, society aspects and the political aspects of what we're seeing right now, we've really seen things devolve in the past 15 or 20 years that most humans nowadays, for one reason or another, the powers that be, I think, are mostly responsible, are going to approach this in the most disingenuous way possible, to gaslight the public and to get us afraid and not speaking with one another. Here we've got all this technology in our fingertips to be connecting with one another. And for the way that the platforms are designed by their very nature, on one hand, beautiful with the algorithm, it connects us with the content we want, but two, it builds silos. And three, the platforms themselves encourage much more passive participation than active participation, if you know what I mean. So while it's great that you're here and I say welcome, stick around this channel if the stuff I'm talking about really interests you, it's also a call for action to you guys. God, source, spirit, Jesus, a higher power is telling me that I really need to get on here and tell people that we have power in numbers and our voice matters. I know it can feel trivial in today's world, given, whoever's got the most money has the loudest megaphone, but just because it's loud doesn't mean it's true. And I think a lot of us, recognize the broken world we live in and just even the state of our country, and recognize there are a lot of problems. Now, so listen, I don't know if this is even going to reach people. I think that's been kind of the frustrating part is I've been putting it out. And one long form video that I put out that was the most successful spoke about human connection. So I know people are searching for it, but I'm not sure exactly why people are not finding it. Is it because, the algorithm is looking at what I'm talking about being partially political? Is it downvoted for those reasons, et cetera? I'm not sure. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my understanding about why we're here. And I'm not saying that you necessarily it's going to resonate on the same level, but perhaps you've had similar experiences that have been profound. I did have an experience where I astrally projected, like 13 years ago, 14 years ago, not at all D-Rug related. But I had this experience where I understood that we really choose to be down here on this polar plane, where there's immense pleasure and immense pain, unlike up there where everything's more the same. And I've also, just from conversations with a friend of mine that, is to Gnosticism, I guess I kind of independently arrived at this view myself, but essentially that for God to be able to experience itself, it had to divide itself. And we all contain a part of source inside of us, which explains why God's omnipotent, right? If it's not just hard baked into the ether itself, the fabric of the universe. But I will tell you, I've worked in science for a really long time, like neuroscience, and we're not really much closer to understanding consciousness. It's an area of research that I hate to say it, we pretend to know more than we actually know. I'm not saying pretend, like we actually look at, the facts and the differentials and whatnot, but I don't think we're really any much closer. Maybe, with computer modeling and stuff and building, neuronal circuits, that emulate pretty close to one with the brain and the complex interactions, we get closer to it, but we still haven't been able to explain consciousness. And, then we look at physics, with spooky action at a distance, or even just maybe the thought that maybe the brain is a quantum computer in itself. Right. So anyways, all I'm just trying to say is that, beyond that, before even going back to school and whatnot, I've always been like a philosophical thinker. And before the movie Avatar came out, essentially that was kind of my view, because my brother had this thing he said, which is like our body's but a shell. And, after he passed, I thought about that a little bit more, and I thought, that's true. And so I thought like maybe consciousness might be like projected onto this interface, this vessel, through the soul or whatever. And that we're really here like in one of the hardest times in history to experience some hard, difficult things in this world. And whether we recognize it or not, we're being called by source, God's Spirit to be here and to show up and to use our voice. I know it seems like it can be trivial nowadays. Like I said, there's so much background noise and everyone's got something to say. But really, for the chosen ones that have operated close to God, and to people I think that are like, on that pinnacle, like where, for some reason their life has went in this completely different direction. We've got important messages to share. And for me, at least, the important message I think God wants me to share, at least for this video, and I'll keep continuing to talk about this, in an overarching way in the future, is God's always shown up for me time and time again in ways that I cannot explain. I see creative design in the universe with the math, natural numbers, golden ratio, all of these different kinds of things. But then you just also look at plants and animals and, the synergistic nature, or even bacteria in our gut, and what we're learning about, the nervous system. And the nervous system is not like this isolated system. And the gut microbiome axis and how it affects neurological diseases, et cetera, which unfortunately I do have one. I've been dealing with chronic health issues for over the past 10 years. I was only recently diagnosed with MS a couple of years ago. So I'm being treated for it, which is great. But for a while it was hard, to go through the whole chronic health issue thing, and to, how providers think that I was malingering or I'm seeking or whatever. But the truth is I just wanted them to solve it, and there were some compassionate providers out there that really, helped in the best way they knew possible, pharmacologically or otherwise, physical therapy and stuff. But I felt so vindicated after going through that for so many years to finally have the answer, because they were wanting to call it depression. And that's what doctors want to call everything nowadays, is just depression, unfortunately. So really, so the question is, how do we connect with all this, given all the background noise and everything going on in the world nowadays? And I think the simple answer is we need to not look at the regrets of the past or fears of the future. The only real time that exists is the present moment. And guess what? It's already gone. So, and from there we can feel empowered, and we need to trust our gut. We need to trust what, if you're a spiritual person, especially if you're a chosen one, been sent down this path and been completely diverted down a different path, to trust the process. God's not asking for our understanding. He's asking for our belief and our faith. As humans, we're so blind just to how little control we have over our lives. It's really a pachinko machine, like one decision leads to another, and et cetera. We really don't have very much control over our lives. I think we confuse ourselves into having control, and through ego and, people that are unhealed, especially, would tend to weaponize things to be able to seek control to get a specific outcome. But the truth of the matter is, I think the more we live closer to God and, being his special anointed, warriors of light that can enter a room and read it and really read people's, intentions and actions. I'm not a person to really judge, but when I start to see patterns emerge and see malice, unrestrained malice in situations that it shouldn't exist, certainly, I'm the first to look at myself and my behavior, but in ways that doesn't make sense, doesn't, add up. We have to recognize that we are the company we keep, right? And while in a perfect world, I think chosen ones think this too, is that we'll believe that, if we put good forward, we'll get good out no matter what. But there are some people that have demons that have never healed, that have never grown up. And so you just have to be selective with what you put out there, but I think God is really calling me in this video to say, your voice matters. I understand you. I'm starting to believe through this next level of my spiritual breakthrough that God's going to provide. Things are all going to work out. Everything I've been put through time and time again, struggle after struggle, crisis after crisis, has prepared me for this moment. And he wants me to recognize that all I need is him. All I need is him. And to understand, I don't need to put out all that energy and all that sacrifice. I mean, there's kindness and boundaries are okay. You don't have to just be continually self-sacrificing. I am a warrior for truth. I really do have a problem that people that are going to approach things from a place of dishonesty. So that's, I think, something that's not going to change. But other than that, I just wanted to say that, your voice matters. We all have power collectively as a group. And it's about time that we start using that and recognizing that we should not be afraid of one another. It's so baked into the human condition that we believe that, what's happened to us is so unique that no one else will understand. But the times that we find the right people, our tribe, open up, tell our stories, etc., we realize how much we have in common and how much as humans we experience a lot of the same feelings, even if they're just slightly deviated in flavor and, cause and effect and, like how they're interconnected, etc. I think these experiences, of being born of the light, but walking through the darkness and being refined from it can teach us a lot about healing one another on our varying paths. I'm not saying I'm all the way through it, but I'd say I'm pretty advanced. I'm still learning, and God's asking for us to, push away the ego, push away the expectations associated with disappointment. Everything's going to work out, and God doesn't work on linear time. He works, on a multiplexed quantum level time, to send us down the right paths in ways that we may not appreciate at the time, but later we really recognize how transformative it is. And I recognize I need to be using my voice more in that way, because I know that not in a self-entitled way too much, but I know that I really have a lot to offer. I just think that the world's really dark and unhealed right now, and there's a lot of the human condition that are coming out narcissistically that is really disappointing. So the question is, how do we ground? How do we demand truth? How do we say we're not taking the gaslight anymore? It's through our collective voice. It's through our contributions. So I encourage each of you, like I said, the platforms are set to basically put you in a passivist situation of just absorbing information, especially short form content. That's becoming a problem, with attention spans and stuff. A lot of the healing is going to happen through art and creativity and expressing our voices and connecting. That's what the powers that be, the hundreds, the thousands out there that exist don't want us to understand. And they also don't want us to understand that inflation is not an accident. It's siphon up economics. That's the reason why it happens, because they're, banking all this money in the Cayman Islands. And we want to know why at the end of the day, we're one of the richest countries in the world and we don't have socialized healthcare. We have a scarcity mindset, even though we're the richest country. And then they want to make us feel bad when we want to rely on our social safety nets and entitlements, which unfortunately Mike Johnson's already planned next year if they can rig the election, which they're trying to, very, very hard by like 20 different angles. I can go into that later. All evidenced by action, not made up, not conspiracy, that they plan on taking away Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. So I just have to say a prayer that hopefully this video gets out. If you like this content, science, philosophy, spirit science, what's going on in the world, processing it, connecting the dots, understanding why we're here, existentialism, philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, you found the right place. Anyway, sorry for the rough nature of this. I had my video, but and I've got the, fully dictated, but I didn't want to just read off. I wanted to offer something more organic. So more to come in the future videos. Please like, rate, and subscribe. And peace and love to you all, and take care.